3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 9,
Go!
8, 3, 2, 3, 4. Damn it!
Welcome, everyone. Hello, nerds. This is episode 1 of what we like to call Level 1 GM.
Recording?
I'm Chad. Hey, everybody. It's Chad and Mike, Durnk Industries. Huh? Now you're interrupting me again? Jesus Christ. Welcome to our first ever podcast. Like we've never done this before.
Yeah.
It feels like we've never done this before. So, I am what you would call a straight up novice when it comes to game mastering. I've just started my very first long-term campaign in Deadlands. It's called Blood Moon. Of course, in the setting of Savage World. So, I'm thinking to myself, how do I become a not shitty game master? That is my goal, is to become something better than what I am now. And with the first episode in the can, I have a lot of thoughts about what maybe makes a good DM versus a bad DM. So, with Mike's help, I am going to become a smurder GM. Mike, tell us a little bit about your experience as a game master, this being our first episode and all.
I have been playing in game mastering since 18 years old. I started out really fucking bad. Didn't understand like story structure at all, which was fascinating because I wrote all the time back then. But and have off and on done it forever. And the past, I've done it a lot. The past 3 to 4 years.
Indeed.
And I feel versed in it now. I feel I intake resources. I listen to, wise individuals from the internet, and I have decided somewhere along the way that it is going to be something I'm going to continue to pursue for potentially the rest of my life. So that is what I'm committing to.
So, and I've been a player. That's been my thing. Okay, I'm
fucking brag about it.
I'm super old. I've played my first game of Dungeons and Dragons, the original Dungeons and Dragons, back in 1985.
When did it start?
I played a little bit up into high school, probably until my freshman year, and then things get weird, and you start to care what people think about you. Because back then, gaming wasn't cool. So, a little bit in college with the GURP system, if you're familiar with that. And then finally, yes, back when we decided that we should play games on the internet and stream them so people can watch us. And I've been playing ever since, and I feel like I'm a pretty good player. But very little game mastering inside of that. I mean, we count it down. Okay, I did a one shot of Honey Heist.
Yes.
And I did maybe, 3 or 4 episode or session sort of bridge between our very first campaign and a jump forward into Starfinder, which Phil took over. So yes. I'm very limited experience in the game mastering thing, but
1974 to answer the question.
So there we go. It was an incredibly refined game.
I was just wondering if you were a beta tester or not.
Fuck you.
Well, demonetized again.
I'm wrapping my head around, how to tell a story inside of role playing. Because I mean, and you touched on this earlier, but you've written for a long time, but it's a little different because we are collaborative storytelling, right? We're
Yeah.
kind of running the show. We're driving the bus, kinda. We have to keep it over 50. But there's like everybody.
Well, while everybody has an emergency brake that they're pulling at
Yes,
all times. Yeah.
exactly. Everybody's trying to get us to stop so that bus will fucking explode. So it's it here. Here's where I'd like to start, if you don't mind, because I think about episode 1 of Deadlands, Blood Moon, which you can watch on Thursdays on Twitch. And I think about setting up on the first episode, introducing these characters, right? No, okay, so what did I do in my cinematic world of storytelling? What did I do? I put everyone, first of all, on a train. Second of all, I put you all split up onto different cars of that train,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
in filmmaking, in that world of storytelling, that's super cool. I can jump back and forth between these little scenarios, and I can cut twos and do all that kind of stuff. When introducing a group of characters in a role playing world, that was a terrible idea. It was difficult to manage that and really the big question here, which is tempo, right? Tempo of the game, keeping things
Right.
moving, keeping things interesting. So you've introduced at this point 4 long-term campaigns from episode 1 on. Is that
Yeah.
about right?
For there's Mustafa Regal, um, uh, Crosden, Distant Star, Cyberpunk, Savage Worlds.
5 then.
Is that it?
Yeah, I think that's, well, yeah, if it's
Yeah, I
not,
think
it's
it's it. I think
so
it's it.
5 separate stories that you.
The Evil campaign. That's 6.
Oh shit, 6. There you go. So you've introduced 6 different campaigns, starting with introducing these groups of characters and bringing them together to start a quest or start a narrative moving forward. What have you learned? What have you learned since, say, the first thing? What was the very first one that we did? Probably the Shadowrun. Was that the
That
very
we
first one?
No, Mustafa Regal was
Was-
the first.
Okay.
You weren't involved.
I
in
weren't.
that,
I
but
wasn't a player in that
first
one.
I did.
So talk us through. I mean, what is your philosophy when you introduce a group of
Waha
characters
Rob
into a game?
7. God damn it, we're at 7. Chat's talking to me. Yeah,
Oh,
we're at
shit.
7.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Um, First off, you can't. My first thought when I go into like introducing is you have to shed all of the things that you're talking about, like filmmaking sort of story arc, where you can, craft this perfect butterfly effect that, a waiter will walk by and ask for drinks, and the female protagonist will put her purse down to look for something, come back up, the purse is snagged, it drags it, she has to chase the bellboy, and it happens to run into. You have to get rid of all of that style of thinking, because they're not going to do whatever you want them to do. Because, and let's make this perfectly clear, gameplay would be better without the players. As a GM, I'm joking, right? I'm clearly joking, but your narrative is always going to be secondary to the experience of everyone involved, and that's including you, by the way. Everyone needs to be having fun, or there's no point. So, a great way to ruin fun for either the players or yourself is to make them do something and never give them an option otherwise. At least without tricking them into the deception of option, but we're not covering that today. So a good way to start with that is to put them in what I've always referred to as a funnel scenario, or think of it as like a whirlpool, where it doesn't matter where they start in the whirlpool, unless they really have a hell of an outboard motor, they're going to end up in the middle of this fucking whirlpool. So, for Crosden, that you were a part of, I put you all as denizens living in the same small town. And not just regular denizens. I said, you all have jobs. What are your jobs? Giving you a specific job in a very small town means that other people with jobs know who you are because they're forced to interact with you occasionally.
You basically set up a scenario where everybody already knows each other.
Yeah.
For Krasden especially.
And it doesn't have to be well.
Right.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be lifelong friends. There's been scenarios where, again, back to Crosden, where, Morgan and Phil have decided that Joe and Ori have been friends for years and years and years, and they got together on their own, and they decided that, and that's fine. But if they don't want to really know each other that well, or they don't want to know each other at all, you still need to create a scenario in which, no matter which way they run, it's in the correct direction.
Right. Then that's that sort of leading them down a path. Letting them, of course, make decisions inside of that.
Right. I'm not telling them how to swim.
Right.
Doggy paddle, backstroke, whatever you want.
But the current's going one way. So, yeah, I get it. So, and so then we take that and we relate it to what I did in our first session of Deadlands. And that is, I put you all on a train. I put you all going the same direction to Santa Fe. And I put you all in the same scenario in that train was about to be stopped by, bad guys, right? So, and this is where I think this is another important thing, I think, for people who've played for a long time. I went into that scenario thinking about how I would play out that scenario. And it's interesting because I say that based on having played with all of you, right? You as GM and as a player, everybody else in the campaign as a player, and going, okay, up to this point we've kind of been problem solvers. Mike's always set up little problems for us to solve, and we're going to go in and we're going to problem solve. And of course, it immediately went to combat. So, and I feel like that basically what we ended up doing there was I created a 3-hour combat session, which from a tempo standpoint isn't great, right? There's a little bit of character development inside of that because we got to see how everybody would react in combat. But, other than that, we just did, because that was 3 hours of that, we had very little opportunity to really actually role play, right. Not to any real extent. So let's then talk about tempo, right? What I feel like I look back at the episode and I go, I needed to figure out a way quickly to truncate that combat and get back to the problem solving, right? That character development stuff. And I realized that too late. I got us where I needed everybody to go in that sense of moving forward with that problem to solve. It just took way too long to get there. So inside of sort of a scenario like that, I'm curious, do you have little tricks that you rely on or you go back to each time to sort of, truncate that, those long combat sessions? We've had some, don't get me wrong, it happens. But do you have any, examples or tricks that you've used?
For combat, I adjust stats on the fly a lot, and I don't know if that's a good tip for a new GM at all. Because I do a lot of auto balancing in my own head. They're on average hitting for 25 points of damage to the bad guys per turn. That's going to take them roughly, if they continue at this speed, it'll take them roughly 6 turns. Each turn's taken about 15 to 20 minutes to get through. That's too long. Let me knock this down so it's closer to 4 turns. They're going through this too quick. There's not going to be any point to this combat if they just walk through it. Let me adjust damage numbers so that they still kill it on time. But if one of them gets hit, they'll get hit hard and they feel actual repercussions to their actions. So as far as combat's concerned, that's kind of an experience thing where I'm at right now. That's
Hmm.
me doing mental math and adjusting on the fly for looking at stat sheets for a long, long time, and knowing how long it takes
Right. And by this
to go
point, you
through.
have a feel for how that
Yeah,
stuff should, how it should feel best, not only
for
to you but the players and in our case, an audience as well.
for a new GM, I would, if you're really worried about it, I would straight up put a timer somewhere near you,
Hmm.
um, and if and just time one round of combat. Just go through everybody doing whatever they're going to do for one round. If that one round is, I was about to say less than 5 minutes, but I don't think there's ever been a round of D&D combat that's less than 5 minutes.
Solo playing,
Between
maybe.
between 5 and 10, it's reasonable. It's
Hmm.
reasonable. You can get through most combats except for extremely large ones in a reasonable amount of time, and I mean reasonable in like by a half an hour. Um, But if they're if we're getting to players' turns and they're not ready with what they want to do, if you're getting to, if they're starting to lose handily, uh, and you don't want them to lose here, you need to adjust from there. And if they're winning too quickly, and it will be, uh, there's something I call the knockover fights, but that we're not talking about here. Knockover fights are just when you want them to feel good. So sometimes you give them a knockover fight.
Nice.
A great example was not this last Sunday, but 2 Sundays ago. I had them fight a bunch of spiders. That was a knockover fight right before I had them fight 3 robots that almost knocked them over. So give them a warm up to knock them back down just for you know energy's sake. But the yeah, you just need to keep the timer in front of you, keep track of how long a round is, and know, even though it's the start of combat, it's not going to get a whole lot faster. It will get faster. Consecutive rounds will get faster
Right.
because a lot of players get in a rhythm where they'll go, well, I did this last turn and it seemed to work, so I'll try it again. Or they'll get in this sunk cost fallacy, where it didn't work, but God damn it, I'm going to try it again. So they'll already have a thing preloaded. The first and second rounds are almost assuredly the longest rounds out of any combat. And if that is an acceptable length, then it's going to be acceptable moving forward. If it's not an acceptable length, you got to do
You
something.
got to do something. And because it's session one, I mean, people are still making sort of character decisions too. I mean, and we're,
Right.
maybe you're in a new system. I mean, we like in this case, we came back to Savage Worlds after months of not using it, maybe even longer than that, whenever that was. So getting used to that process again. But I guess maybe the question becomes: is it a good idea to start with combat? To go session one, let's open with some fights. Maybe not.
Yeah,
Not so good.
it could be.
Yes. Okay.
It could be. Um, the fight needs to serve a narrative purpose. There, this goes to another thing I talk about with other GMs and people running things. I've had prolonged discussions with Jay because we're both doing Sunday's campaign about
Yeah.
this. There are things in D&D and all role playing, especially when you go looking through like monsters handbooks and stuff like that I like to refer to as trash monsters. Now, the point of trash monsters are they are just a thing for a GM to put in front of some guys, put in front of some players, so that they can smack it with a thing. It doesn't fit in any particular way. It always feels forced, like you're doing a gotcha moment.
Right.
Um, you know what I mean? Oh, this thing that happens to be good against you is wandering around the town bar. The I don't like those. I don't like trash monsters in general. I think if you're in need of a trash monster, then you're in need to figure out what your party's strengths and weaknesses actually are, and you're taking it at too black and white of a response. You got a party of fighters, so you put them against two rust monsters for no reason. That'll eat up their weapons and make them figure something else out. How about instead have a lightning elemental happen so that they choose to remove their weapons and armor? There's other ways to do things to make players. Jeez, I've totally lost the plot on this.
It's like it's the difference. I feel like it's the difference between what we would call sort of the average dungeon crawl, right?
Yes.
Where you go here and you fight something, and then you go here and you fight something, and then you go here and maybe you defuse a trap, and then maybe you'll here, right? And I'm sure that there are players that really like that. I got to imagine if you're like a first time GM, starting with a campaign like that, or starting with a module that or whatever, something that's laid out for you to give you sort of a like a framework to build something around. That's probably a good way to learn things, but it certainly isn't all that interesting to tell a story that way, or even to play that way, right?
Laura says in chat, scenarios like that often cause the party to feel like it's us versus the GM.
Right.
And that's true.
Yeah.
If at any point, there's a lot of jokes and memes online, especially in certain D&D communities, Reddit, that like to do jokes about GMs actively trying to kill their party or something like that. And I'll joke about it occasionally, but I've never tried to kill the party. If you're a GM trying to kill the party, you need to assess to say that ahead of time, or you're a bad GM. Because that's, again, going back to, it's a game that's supposed to be fun for everybody. And
right.
It's not fun for everybody. And that brings us back to tempo.
Exactly.
Actually.
Yep.
Because the GM's job, and where most of the fun is had by the GM, is crafting that scenario. Putting those tent poles in that you want to feel good. Like for Blood for Thursday, right?
Right.
You wanted this heist thing to happen. And then partway through, a bunch of monsters show up, and now the bandits and the party kind of work together because there's this greater threat. Now that I've gone through it, I can see that was your goal. Yes?
Indeed.
The problem was, in fact, tempo. You got it right.
Yeah, absolutely.
The moment I shot the first guy, and by the way, my character is a cop.
Yeah. You were playing the character.
They tried to rob the train. But the moment I shot the first guy should have been the first red flag that this is going to, despite that they're not there, there's only one other character there, and that's Phil's character. Phil's character, even if we're playing purely without any sort of metagaming, like everybody's somehow these magically omniscient players that can just, I'm going to zen out and I can't hear anybody else that's not in the game room with me.
Right.
Unless they're that, every other player is going to go, well, I guess we're fighting now.
Exactly.
Because they're sitting around the same proverbial table.
Yep.
And that feeling, it's the same as, a feeling on to relate it to you, a feeling on set.
Mm-hmm.
If one person, the director, an actor, um, lighting doesn't matter, comes in with
Yep.
having a bad day.
Yep. The set's energy is always, it's sort of,
It's its own being,
mm-hmm.
the energy of the room.
Yeah,
The same
exactly.
thing with the game table.
Yeah.
Somebody comes in and sets an energy. It is highly unlikely that the rest of the group diverts from that. Unless
Exactly.
the energy is so far left field, like entirely inappropriate, you know, overly aggressive to other players. Toxic is basically where
Yep.
I'm going with this.
Yep. Exactly.
Um, that the rest of the group is going to go with it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
And
the
that's
moment I shot the first guy should have been your red flag.
you know,
I'm gonna have to cut this in quick.
yeah, and that's where, and this is the interesting part of that. I got swept up in that as well. That
Yes.
energy. It's like,
Yes.
okay, cool. This is a shootout. I mean, we're playing inside of a world where combat is sort of, it's essentially going.
Dangerous.
There's going to be a lot of go to, kill some shit, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I got swept up in that too, and it wasn't until because I knew, okay, I had to get you guys to the Gatling gun. I mean, that's what it came down to. You guys got to get you guys to the Gatling gun, and then things can turn and everything will be fine. But instead of trying to find a point to truncate that and allow that to happen quickly, I got caught up in the fight too. So, again, because I'm used to being a player, right?
Right.
And you're dead on right when one thing, these things just those energies feed off each other, and you're like, hell yeah, let's do this.
Now, can I ask you something about your preparation process?
Please.
To help you with that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have notes sitting in front of you when you start the game?
I have character names and stuff like that set out.
Okay.
I don't have plot point so much.
Plot points are important, and
Okay.
I will show you exactly one excerpt. Okay.
Dig it.
This right here.
It's
That's
just
not
a
showing up
big, ugly
whatsoever.
white piece of paper. But there we
There you
go.
go.
There we
There you
go.
go. That are all plot points from Sunday
Okay.
before we ever started the show.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it. And
going.
it doesn't have to be they do it this way. It's
No.
just here's the things that are there.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the things that the NPCs or the environment or the creatures, here's the things happening around them that
Right.
I need to get to
Right.
so that they can react to in kind.
Right. And I had those, I mean, in that context where we're talking about, I knew where I wanted you guys to get. What I feel like
Right.
then what I didn't have so much were sort of some of those tertiary things that would lead back to a major plot point. Because I get
Right.
looking at your notes, I'm like, okay, he's got a couple of things set up there.
Yeah.
Walk me through that.
Okay.
You
Well,
can
I'll
you
do.
can use your notes for
Okay.
sure.
So what I have written here is weather exposure and landslide.
Yep.
Tishvia, which is a side character and sort of overpowered enigma sort of character that they've been dealing with.
This is from Sunday's episode of Distant
Sunday's
Star that you can
yes.
watch on Twitch.
And in 3 months on YouTube. Tishia gives Rainbow access to libraries, which happened. Gold chain, which is they all got their gold chains. One of them didn't get hit, but the last one did. Just reminders for myself in order, in chronological order. Things you have to hit in order to get the reactions you need. Again, going back to the whirlpool concept. This hitting these small tempo points, because they're not plot points.
Right.
A lot of them are effectively irrelevant to the plot. The point of the weather exposure and landslide is because previously I had said this town that they were at the beginning of the episode had sent out 2 couriers to this grand order, and there had been no response. It appeared as if this order had abandoned them. It hadn't. There was a large storm, and both of the couriers died. So I wanted to elicit initially that this grand order had just ignored them, right? Everyone in that town had felt like this grand order had just abandoned them. And they kept saying that. They just abandoned us. But I didn't want it to be that black and white.
Right.
So it's on their own, away from everything else, I have them. And there was no way to fail this. Right? I was going to lead them along the way with skill checks and NPC interaction that they were going to get here. There was a small amount of rock slide. They had to get out of their caravan they were in. They had to move these rocks. Everybody needed to roll perception. 2 of them passed. The 2 highest people passed. And GM secret, it doesn't matter what number you set it at. If you want people to succeed, just pick the highest guy and say you did it. And 2 of them passed, and saw a dead horse lying at the bottom of this hill. Well, one of the characters, who's not going to go check
Right.
on an injured animal? So they head down the hill and check on it. Sure enough, it's the first courier. The horse had fallen down the hill. The courier had hit his head. The horse broke his legs. They both died there.
Right.
Well, they go up while the one guy's down the hill. They get a rider coming back. There was a scout ahead that said, "Well, there's a landslide." Okay, well, they go to the landslide and they start digging out. They get it all dug out, and as one of them standing on the side, they see another courier at the bottom of this cliff in the mud, halfway sticking out. So now they know. Now they have this emotional conflict where they go, "Oh, we just assumed that this order had abandoned them, but the fact of the matter is just the world killed them. So now we have to reassess, and we have to send knowledge back." And it creates this, it's a throwaway stuff, right? It's not necessary, but it does create depth and tempo where there wouldn't be otherwise.
Right. It's essentially tempo as sort of breadcrumbs in that you're giving every well, I hate to use this word, but you're basically managing some of those choices,
right,
by leading them down a path that leads to wherever you need to lead them to.
And here's the tricky bit. When you get enough time under your belt, you can really get people to follow the breadcrumbs for a long fucking way. A long fucking way. Thanks, Horse. I got a choice you can manage. Yeah. As soon as you understand your group you're playing with, and I feel like I understand you guys pretty well, and you'll get to this point fairly quickly because you know all of us pretty well.
Right.
You just need to have that internal clock starting from your preparation for the week.
Right.
Of going, these are all the things I have to hit.
Right.
And if I'm going to put combat in it, or the potential for combat, and I still need to hit these points, I need to curve that combat in a specific manner.
Right. So you've got a plan essentially. So people, you need a plan. All right.
Yes.
Number 2, what is your one big piece of advice when introducing characters?
One big piece of advice when introducing characters is always have a session 0. Never, unless you were doing a short run campaign, none of you know each other. You happen to be in the same bar.
Make sure there are relationships. Is what you're saying.
It's a trope in D&D to go, you're all just happen to be in the same bar.
Right.
Listen, you can do that, but you better have a good fucking reason that they're all there. Like you're a bunch of strangers in the same bar. I did this for A Distant Star. They were all strangers, minus the Hanover twins, Laura and Morgan. They were all strangers, but they were commanded by the local lord to show up to the same place.
Right. Right.
Big reward. Come here. Not optional.
Right.
You have to give them a reason. If you're just dropping them in saying you don't know each other, start talking, there's no reason they would ever talk.
Exactly. Exactly. So there we go. Have a plan. Have a reason for your characters to be in the same place at the same time, and give them a reason to interact with each other.
Yes.
Give me a third top session 1 tip.
Third top session 1 tip. Try not to do combat. You can do combat in session 1, and actually it is a very interesting narrative choice to do combat in session 1 on a campaign. It's actually something I've got preloaded for something in the future. But
if you're gonna do that,
but if you're gonna the problems with doing that are, A, you don't know how effective their character builds are currently, right, and you don't know how to balance against that. So you could overboard it or you could underboard it, and then you could give them a wrong impression about where the whole thing's going to go.
And be prepared to manage that tempo.
Yes. Be prepared to change it.
Yeah.
On the fly. If you are the GM type that cannot divert from your pre-packaged, this is what needs to happen, it's going to be really hard for you to run a prolonged campaign. Small adventure, couple sessions, sure. Long run campaign, that's how you get players upset with railroading, and then they drop off.
Right. Yeah. Gotcha. Excellent. So, there you go, people. Session 1 rules. Mike's 3 session 1 rules that are all convoluted inside of that.
Also, if you're GMing, you don't have to buy snacks. That's just it's not has any. They put that in session 1. You don't have to buy snacks if you're GMing.
Your table, your rules, people.
Yeah.
So, to bring it all in, do as he says, not as I do. I am the level 1 GM. I'm Chad. You can see us here on Durnk, on the channel on Durnk. On what the hell am I trying to say? You can see us on Twitch, Durnk Industries channel. Wednesday, 5e. Thursday, Deadlands, Savage Worlds get play, and Sunday some more 5e. Come hang out with us. Also on YouTube. I'll put links and stuff.
We're planning on doing this Tuesday thing.
Yeah.
Moving forward.
So next week we'll talk about my session 2 and see if I did any better.
You didn't do great.
Thanks, everybody. I'm learning things. You should learn stuff too. We'll talk to you guys later. Okay, I'm gonna stop stream now. I'm stopping.
Don't say that.
I'm just gonna stop the stream.